Right everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm very kind of pink today for some reason. I'm not quite sure what the situation is there. But it's a big day for 67 Hail Hail. You may or may not have noticed, but very recently we crossed the 20,000 subscriber barrier. My first thought is, what the hell are you lot playing at? Why do 20,000 people want to sub to this idiot and some of his mates chatting about Celtic? But we appreciate the support nonetheless. Obviously the channel isn't going to stop here. We're going to keep motoring on. But it's a nice point, I think, to just kind of pause and reflect on where the channel has come from and where it is now. And it's all down to you wonderful people. You really are the best people in the world. But am I happy with that? No, I'm not. I want more. No Gallagher, etc, etc. Today, we're doing a Q&A. Now, the Q in the Q&A stands for questions and the A stands for answers. The questions have come from you. The answers will very soon come from me. It was actually John's idea to kind of do a bit of a fun video on the channel for us hitting 20,000 subs. I'm a very arrogant and selfish person, so this very much played into my kind of way of thinking. So I'm a huge fan of the spotlight being on me in this video. I'm not actually, but yeah, we're going to have loads of questions today. So yeah, let's get into it. Right, questions. We've got questions, lots of questions, most of them on Celtic. A few rogue ones on different topics, a few daft ones in there as well. Thanks everyone who asked me a question either on YouTube or on Twitter. We had far too many to include. And again, on top of being arrogant and selfish, I'm quite lazy as well. Didn't want to do like a crazy long video. So I came up with a brilliant idea that worked and also got me out of a hole. 20 questions for 20k. Some of them I've spent some considerable time on. Others I've shown the contempt that they quite frankly deserved. They're in no order at all, so it might go Celtic to food, back to Celtic to some other daft topic. It's going to be a long video anyway, I think, so I'm going to crack on with the first question. Right, Gary Jones is asking, when did you first start your adventure on here and what made you do it? So basically, I wrote on 67hailhail.com, great website. I did that for, I think, about a year and a half. And then we decided that we wanted to try YouTube, basically, see if we could make inroads on YouTube. And then the pandemic hit, and the pandemic was absolutely awful, completely awful. I'm not going to make any jokes to do with that at all. Obviously, it's affected so many people, affected me, affected everyone on this planet. The one good thing that did come from it, from my point of view, was that it didn't make sense for us to have everyone writing on 67hailhail.com while there was no football getting played from, I think, March to, was it July or something for Celtic? June, July. So we decided to really put an effort into the YouTube. I am now obviously only on the YouTube, and that's kind of how the YouTube grew. So you can thank COVID for what you're watching right now. Right, next question. Jigsy, hello Jigsy, is asking, which past player would you have liked to have seen play? I really struggled to read that for some reason. It's a pretty simple question. I saw Henrik Larsson a few times, although I didn't get my first season ticket until 2005. He left, I think, in 2004. But I think this question from Jigsy is more about players that I didn't see at all, maybe even players that were around before I was born / into football at all. The obvious ones to look at are the Lisbon Lions, and probably the most obvious one out of all the Lisbon Lions is Jimmy Johnson, just an incredible player. Judging from some of the footage and some of the numbers and the kind of teams he played against. Was it Di Stefano's testimonial? He ran riot in the Bernabeu. Correct me if I'm wrong with that one. But I'm not going to go for any of the Lisbon Lions. I'm going to go for Paul McStay. I actually didn't know much about Paul McStay at all. I knew that he'd kind of been a shining light in a mainly struggling Celtic team, certainly at the end of his career. I knew he'd had injury problems at the end of his career and had to retire. I knew that Jackie McNamara spoke so highly of him. In fact, I didn't know that. I've known that recently. But everyone just kind of talks so highly of Paul McStay, some of the comments he made, the way he carried himself on the pitch, but mainly how good a player he was and how he controlled the game from the midfield as the maestro, if I pronounced that correctly. Maestro. I don't know why I went with the IA. Paul McStay. Tom McClendon is asking, do you still have the Eddie Howe mug, and can you build a five-a-side team of the best players you've seen against Celtic? No, of course I don't have the Eddie Howe mug. In terms of the second part of your question, there's been so many good players I've played against Celtic over the years. Obviously, they're going to come from the best sides in Europe. This is a team I've gone for. Gianluigi Buffon, for me, the best goalkeeper of the 21st century. Puyol, Carlos Puyol that is, just loved him. Was an absolute warrior, but he could play as well. Iconic, some would say, but more on that later. That front three, Kaká, probably the first player I absolutely loved. He always seemed to love playing against Celtic as well, unfortunately. And then the two greatest players of the 21st century, possibly ever, Lionel Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo. The amazing thing that I just realised when I was writing these players down, I saw both of these amazing players leaving Celtic Park with no points. They both lost at Celtic Park in their careers, and that's a pretty special thing to say. I know it's quite attacking, but come on, it's fives, and no team is beating that front three. Helen McCallum's asking, what is your favourite Celtic game you have been to? Again, trying to rack my brains. There are some from early on when I had my season ticket. In 2005 I got it, as I said earlier. Man United, beating them. Beating AC Milan. Beating Shakhtar Donetsk was pretty special as well. Probably a little bit too young. What would I have been, about 8 or 9, maybe even 10 for those kind of games. Maybe didn't quite appreciate it as much as I would now, certainly. So I'm going to go for one out of the three kind of slightly more recent ones. Now, Barcelona, beating them in 2012. Again, probably still at that stage only 14, 15, but certainly appreciated it more. Really understood who we were up against, the size of the task. Appreciated the size of the result as well. Beating Rangers at Ibrox with 10 men, the Edward game, being in the away support at Ibrox that day was pretty incredible. And the one I'm going to go for, the treble invincible final, it's probably got a better name than that. Maybe it's just the Tom Rogic final when he scored that winner. The reason I've gone for that is the only one out of all of these that moved me to tears. And I think it's the only time I've ever properly cried at a Celtic game. The emotion that day was amazing. I remember it bucketed rain on the walk-in. Nobody had jackets on. I think it had been sunny and the rain came out of nowhere. Everyone was soaked. Nobody cared when Tom Rogic put in that last gasp winner. Incredible day. Right, Gary Caldwell. Who was the first Celtic player who was a hero to you? Gary Caldwell. No, not Gary Cole, that's who's asking the question. Shinsuke Nakamura is the absolute obvious one to go for here. He's the first player. I'm not going to say anything cliched like he's the one who made me fall in love with the game. I loved football before he came along, but he had this amazing thing that you wanted to turn up to Celtic Park to watch Celtic against anyone, St Mirren, Ross County, Hamilton Accies, just because Nakamura was playing and just to see what that genius could do. The same thing Kyogo has right now, if we're honest. But Nakamura was a hell of a player. I remember his debut against Dundee United. I think it was maybe one of my first games when I had the season ticket. One of the best debuts I can ever remember. Didn't actually score that day, although he nearly scored what would soon become his trademark, a brilliant free kick. He was just an amazing player. As I say, made you want to go to Celtic Park every week, a bit like Kyogo does at the moment. Maybe it's just a Japanese thing. Right, Luke Spears is getting to the real questions now. What's your favourite nightclub in Glasgow? I haven't been in a club in a long, long time. I feel like COVID has kind of changed people's perception. Certainly me and my pals, the fact that, I've got a little bit older since COVID happened about a year and a half ago. And also, I think the fact that it was only pubs for a year, people were kind of happier to sit in pubs for a while and have a conversation rather than, getting right on it with loud music. I certainly prefer pubs to clubs nowadays. But if you're asking, what was my favourite nightclub, I did quite like the O2 ABC before it very sadly burned down. I went to Garage a bit back in the day, and let's be honest, if I have had a few in Glasgow in the coming months, maybe around Christmas time, you may well see me in there once again, although I did feel a bit like Davy Weir in there because I'm getting on and there's some very young people in there. Ado is wondering, if you were forced to support another Premiership team in Scotland other than Celtic, who would it be and why? I really like Dundee United. For me, they're a proper club with a proper fan base. I did a bit of reporting work back in the day, it was about 3 or 4 years ago, and I had to do Dundee United games at Tannadice quite a lot. And even when they were in the Championship and they were playing against teams like Falkirk and Morton and Dunfermline, they still had a pretty good support there. They're quite loyal fans, quite understanding fans as well, and the atmosphere behind that net, I don't know what the stand's called. It's basically the one that's opposite the shed where Celtic fans are put in. I would definitely be a Dundee United fan if Celtic were, I don't know, liquidated or something. Jonah67, would you rather fight a horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses? This is one that folk always bring up, but it's quite simple for me. You would go with the 100 duck-sized horses, because they're going to be really small and you can probably just boot them all. Darren McMullen, if you had a time machine and you could go back and pick a best 11 plus 5 subs with a limit of 2 players per manager era from Martin O'Neill onwards, who would you pick? PS, you have to pick the season for each of these players when they were at their best. Right, Darren, I see your question. Thanks so much. You have no idea how long I have spent today, time when I should really be doing proper work, trying to think of this. I even roped in some of my pals in a group chat I'm in. Big thanks to those guys. They know who they are. I've come up with a team. I'm not going to bother with subs, mate, because I'm going to be here all day and I genuinely do have some stuff to get on with. So this is the team I've gone for. Again, I'm not going to spend too long, but Fraser Forster in nets. Fraser Forster from the 2019-2020 season, that is. Either him or Artur Boric, but Forster that year was incredible as we won 9 in a row. Andres Hinkle from the Tony Mowbray era at right back. Terrible season, our best player that season. Centre backs, Virgil van Dijk, 14-15, and Charlie Mulgrew, 11-12. Mulgrew won the Player of the Year. That was the year, obviously, we first won the league under Neil Lennon. The year before that, when we didn't win the league, Izagiri, what a player he was that season. An absolute monster getting up and down that wing, typified by that Gary Hooper goal against Rangers with Izzy getting onto the Sammy pass and crossing it in. He was an amazing player. How good would Izagiri have been if he hadn't have got that leg break at Pittodrie the following season? Right mid, Nakamura, already spoken about him. I think 06-07 was his best year. Midfield, Paul Lambert from 01-02 under Martin O'Neill, of course. I did want Wanyama in there, but I couldn't fit him in due to having too many from Neil Lennon's first spell. Next to Paul Lambert is Scott Brown, the season he won all those awards under Brendan Rodgers, 17-18 that was. Aidan McGeady from 07-08 on the left wing under Gordon Strachan. And listen to this for a front two. Henrik Larsson, 2000, 2001, 53 goals in all competitions. Amazing. And Moussa Dembele from the Invincible season. Lee Griffiths, the year previous to that, was a contender. I just think, as much as Griffiths, I think, scored more goals than Dembele scored goals against like Man City, Gladbach. He scored about 18 against Rangers alone that season. Him and Larsson together. Oh my God. Patrick M wondering, what has been your best abroad Celtic experience and why? I think I've only actually been on 2 away trips with Celtic, unless you're counting like Dublin and London as being abroad, which I don't really think they are. Went to Cluj for the Europa League game, the one when we'd already won the group. That was fun, really good trip, disappointing to lose. Also, the other one was Barcelona in 2012, when we lost 2-1, the one when James Forrest switched off at the back post. Jordi Alba scored. That was a tough one to take because we really deserved something from that game, given the effort we'd put in. Obviously, we'd beat them a few weeks later as well. But I just remember everyone being really quite happy with the effort Celtic had put in the new camp. Effie Ambrose, I've still not forgiven you for missing that great headed chance in the second half. John Boy 67, what is one of your favourite magical moments at Paradise? There are so many. I mean, you now try and think of them, just the kind of obvious ones come to mind. So I didn't want to go obvious. I wanted to go with one that you maybe wouldn't think of immediately, and it was Massimo Donati's winner against Shakhtar Donetsk. I don't think Celtic Park has ever gone that nuts since that goal. And we've scored kind of bigger goals. We've scored last minute winners against Rangers and Barca. That Donati goal against Shakhtar Donetsk was incredible. I just absolutely loved that goal. An amazing night as well. Moving on, Crowtails 88. Do you like Worcester sauce crisps with tuna and pilau rice all mixed up in a bowl? It's bloody delicious. Healing Skinhead, do you agree the texture of an avocado feels as though it's already been soaked by someone? Come on, you guacamole in green. Paul Fisher, my question is whether or not you would scran a mashed potato panini. Paul is a good mate of mine, and Paul has some very inventive, let's just say, inventions, food-wise. Mashed potato panini, I would probably go for that. It sounds daft, but I can be quite daft with food combinations. Give you an idea that, and don't unsubscribe when I say this, tomato ketchup, I have it in macaroni cheese. Right, Matthew, thank God, bringing it back to the football. What's the most underrated game you've attended at Celtic Park? Okay, this is quite a weird one, but I kind of feel like that's what underrated kind of means, that you're going for one that wouldn't, again, come immediately to mind. Invincible season, Scottish Cup, I think quarter-final at home to St Mirren. We had been like unbelievable that season. We'd basically not been behind the whole of the season. I think Kilmarnock and Rangers would maybe been ahead of us, but for like 20 minutes or something. But St Mirren were ahead for quite a chunk of this game, probably until about the hour mark. Further to that, Moussa Dembele hit his own crossbar that would have put us 2-0 behind and really up against it to go through in the Scottish Cup. Bearing in mind that we had to win the Scottish Cup to win the treble. And we were struggling big time, about an hour into the game, as I say, and we scored, I think, 58th and 59th minute. The second one being a Scott Sinclair looped goal into the net. I think it might have been deflected. It's probably a small game. I think there was Celtic Park certainly wasn't full, maybe 30,000 or something there that day. It was live on Sky Sports. But that one just springs out to me as being one of the moments when I thought this team is incredible and no one is going to stop this team. So I'll go for that. Betfred Cup semi-final against Hibs, the one that was on the Saturday night at Hampden under Neil Lennon's second time round. That was pretty special. I think 5-2 that finished. And also another strange one, European one, Rennes beating them 3-1, but not the one you're thinking of. I'm talking about the older one, 2011, I think it would have been. Rennes went ahead after about a minute. We came back to win 3-1 in that game. Gary Hooper scoring the third goal. That was a pretty special night as well, but people probably wouldn't remember it. And finally, John McGinley, the guy who came up with the idea to do this very video. Who is the bigger icon, not a better player, the bigger icon, Zidane or Messi? Well, from that question, John obviously thinks that Zidane is the bigger icon. We have had many a debate over the years. I think going back about 5 or 6 years, me and John, I'll be honest, and I kind of get his point now. Messi's obviously a better player, but seeing as he's not asking that, Zidane possibly is a bigger icon in terms of the moments he had right up until the end of his career, playing in the World Cup final, scoring a Panenka penalty, and then getting sent off for headbutting someone. Like, in the biggest game in football, his final game, obviously that volley at Hampden's probably one of the most iconic goals of the 21st century. Yeah, I'm going to give John the benefit of the doubt and say that Zidane's maybe more iconic. Right, that's us reached the end of this rather long video then. Don't worry if this wasn't your thing at all, because this is probably going to be a one-off. Let's just say we're going to move back on with the content as we aim for our next 20,000 from tomorrow onwards. Thank you so much, genuinely serious bit here. Thank you so much for all the support on the channel. I appreciate it. All of the other guys affiliated to 67 Hail appreciate it as well. We're not going anywhere. We're going to keep firing on. Take care, everyone, and hail.